Hey, welcome to Ask a Pastor. Today I'm joined by Dr. Terry Thomas, who often teaches at Orchard Hill. He also teaches New Testament at Geneva College, among other things. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here. If you have questions for Ask a Pastor, please feel free to send them to askapastor@orchardhillchurch.com. We would love to talk about your questions in coming weeks. But today we're going to actually focus on Christmas. We have one question that was submitted around Christmas, and then I've got a couple questions for Terry that maybe I'll add into the mix along the way. So Terry, the first question that we have is somebody said, I often fight discouragement, maybe even depression during the holiday season. Any help on how to battle this would be appreciated. And obviously, for a lot of people, they say this is the most wonderful time of the year. And for others, it isn't.
It's the worst.
And it is a hard time for a variety of reasons. But what would you say to somebody who says, every time this time of year comes, it's actually hard. It's not great, but I know it's going to be hard. How would you advise or counsel that person?
Well, first thing I'd say is this. I'd say, the reason why it's probably hard at this time of year is because of the stress that they're experiencing. It's unlike other times of the year. You got to recognize that. It's not, especially with all the hype that you get from, TV or whatever, about how merry and happy everybody is, and you're feeling stressed and you think to yourself, wow. And it's there's all kind of things about the commercialization of Christmas, I think, that put stress on people. Got to get the perfect gift, and a lot of times that creates financial problems for people that they, again, they're trying to figure out how you're going to struggle with that. I think a lot of times, too, is that they anticipate that they're going to be spending time with their family. Not always the happiest thing in the world, unfortunately.
Sometimes that's stress.
Yes, exactly. Well, a lot of time, even if you've got a great family, I think sometimes you anticipate that being so fantastic that you might be disappointed, by the fact that it is.
Hard to live up to the expectations sometimes.
Very, very hard to live up to the expectations. And and that's why I suggest one of the things you don't do is don't watch a lot of the Hallmark Channel during the Christmas time. My wife is kind of addicted to it. As a matter of fact, there's
your wife.
My wife. I've never seen any of them yet. But all those, it's the same story over and over and over again, and they always end completely happy, where everything's wonderful and everything's worked out. Life isn't like that, And in high stress situations, oftentimes it doesn't always work out that well. And so I would think that one of the first things you do is you just recognize, so that you're aware that part of the way you feel is created by this time of year, and that's normal, that's natural, that's not something weird about you or something that, that's a real thing that you're experiencing. So that's the first thing I would say. And I think that when people get depressed, I think they can sort of recognize it, by their behaviors in some ways. They have headaches. They have trouble sleeping a lot of times. They lose their appetite. It's not that they don't spend a lot of time in bed trying to sleep. It's that they don't get good sleep. And then they do things oftentimes that don't help them to be able to deal with that stress. Like drink. A lot of people and. That's another thing which I think is connected somehow with the partying of the season. So bad idea, because alcohol's a depressant. You're already feeling stressed and depressed, and you take a depressant. You think not a good idea.
Bring you down even farther.
Exactly. And sometimes you'll be surprised. You have the disappointment of, why don't I feel? I ought to feel better. So I've been told that I ought to feel better if I do this. So I think you recognize that in yourself. You see the headaches, the stress. You see you're touchy with people. You recognize you have that feeling of loneliness that you're. I think you can put your finger on the fact that you're down at this time of year. I don't think it should be. I don't think it's a surprise to anybody. But it's about the time of year. I think at that point. A lot of things that create that.
So spiritually, when somebody starts kind of going into that tailspin. There are some practical things that probably feel like they have nothing to do with our spiritual life.
Right.
Like don't drink, lower your expectations.
Exactly.
Those kinds of things. Where is the spiritual dynamic touch into this? And is there a spiritual answer? And if so, what is it?
Well, again, see, I think you're right. You don't want to somehow say to yourself, well, if I just pray, everything will be fine. Nothing.
Right.
Will. I think it's a lifestyle thing as a whole. I think you got to make a lot of wise choices to be able to feel good about what's going on around you. But I do think that one of the great opportunities of Christmas is and of the season is to remind yourself of how good God has been to you. That in other words, why should I feel bad when we're celebrating this spectacular gift of God to us? And so I think that's why I would say one of the things that, practically speaking, I would do is I'd get out and go to church. Get yourself in a situation where you're going to be reminded of the goodness of God, of the fact that his love is so incredible that he is willing to humble himself to the point even of dying, not just becoming a human being, but to the point of dying, so that people can experience a full and meaningful life.
Yeah.
So I think getting in that context, going and reminding yourself of that, and being with people who share that same vision, I think can really be helpful. The other thing too is, most of the time, I know, like here at Orchard Hill, the Christmas experience, if you take one of the Christmas Eve services or the services as we like to have them every weekend, they have an aesthetic side to them too, which is just beautiful, And again, it's hard to, in the face of that kind of beauty, of celebrating the beauty of what God's created and the goodness of it, to maintain that kind of dour spirit about life. When you see something beautiful, it's like watching that. My wife does this too. She watches videos on Facebook. I don't, of course, do that, or YouTube. I don't do that. But and you see that little kid that's so cute that does something, and you go, oh, you can't help but smile.
Yeah.
Good thing.
Yeah.
You're in a situation where you're stressed, you're depressed, you're down. Hey, get in a context where it's a place of beauty. It's a place reminding you of the love of God and the goodness of God.
It's one of the things that I think about is that there is no single answer because each case is so different.
Oh, yeah.
There are, mild kind of, I'm sad, it's the holidays, somebody's not coming home, or something's a little different than it used to be. So there's that kind of, but then there can be clinical depression, and sometimes the answer might be medical. There might be seeing a doctor, getting medication. Sometimes it might be psychological. Sometimes it might be relational. Sometimes it's spiritual. And if you try to apply the wrong answer to the wrong problem, what you end up with is you end up complicating it because you say to somebody, hey, your problem is this, and if you would just do these things, and it may or may not help them. And nothing is worse than telling somebody who is struggling, you shouldn't feel that way. And so at the end of the day, one thing that's helpful is just to say, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to name your sadness. In fact, I believe that one of the best ways to approach this is to articulate that you're sad, why you think you're sad, and tell yourself it's okay to be sad.
Yes.
Because there's something in the I shouldn't feel this way. It's the most wonderful time of the year that adds to the power of that, and especially when somebody well-meaning comes along and says, well, you should just have faith in Jesus. He's given us these great things, and you shouldn't feel this way because of all the goodness. Now, having said that, a lot of times what is behind our depression, sadness, despondency, whatever word you want to use, whatever even degree is there, is that we have made an idol of something that has become so important to us that we say, if I don't have this, then my life can't be received well, it can't be happy.
Right.
And what we need to do at that point is recognize that might be an idol, something we've raised above God, and say, if my truest satisfaction comes from God, from knowing that I'm a loved child of God, that Jesus has done for me what he's done for me, then I can look at that thing and say, I still am sad that that's not in my life, or that isn't what I thought it should be, but that isn't my ultimate joy. Yeah, and if we can get there, then we can begin to address maybe a deeper cause, and that really does tie into our spiritual life.
Yeah, and I think you're in constant conflict with the culture to not give in to those idols at that point,
Right.
because you're being told things about consumerism. You can feel good about yourself, and so if you're given the right Christmas present,
Right.
if you got that Mercedes out in the park, out in the driveway
Right.
with the big ribbon on it, it's you gotta look. Oh, you finally
Right.
did. Yeah, then you can feel good about yourself. Well,
And that only lasts so long. Yeah.
I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
But
Well, I don't know of that personally, but
No,
the
exactly.
example, and I've used this before, it's the Happy Meal for a child.
Yeah.
A kid gets a Happy Meal, he's happy for 15 minutes,
maybe.
and then they're not happy because
right.
the Happy Meal doesn't actually buy you happiness.
Exactly.
And all that happens as we get older is our Happy Meals get more expensive
Exactly.
and bigger. And maybe they last a little longer, but it's the same thing. None of us go on vacation, buy something, do something that changes fundamentally how we feel.
Exactly.
It gives us a moment, which is good, but that's it.
And that's what the consumeristic culture plays off of, namely that we can promise you this meaning,
Yeah.
but we really can't deliver it.
Yeah.
And so it's just the whole litany of things. I think the other thing is we think about relationships at a certain point, and that's what the Hallmark movies tend to be all about. As soon as you see it snowing and that kiss happens, oh, life's good. It's all resolved. Life isn't like that again. I don't think we don't always have the most perfect of relationships. They don't always work out that way. We find ourselves lonely.
Right.
The reality is we got to figure out what can we do to deal with that.
Right.
I mean, there are practical things you can do when you're lonely and you sense that in your depression, and you can look for people to be who are caring people to spend time with. You can. This is what you would think you would cultivate friendships for,
Right.
along the way. Hey, that's part of the reason what the church can provide for people
Right.
too. It can provide a community of people that care and that you can get to know and you can be with. Here's the thing too. I think when you get you can volunteer.
Yeah.
You can go out and care for other people.
Yeah.
In a certain sense, that gets you off yourself, but it also gets you in relationship with other people.
Was it Isaiah 55, I think, verse 8 and 9, that says when you give yourself to the hungry, when you give yourself to the needy, basically, then your countenance will rise like the noonday sun.
Yeah.
And so it's the very biblical idea to say, as I serve, I actually find my countenance changing. Let me shift gears here for a moment.
All right.
So you mentioned consumeristic culture a few times.
Okay.
How do we, or does somebody not overspend at the holidays? And the reason I ask this question is I think for some people it's not an issue. They have enough, they can spend whatever they want.
Right.
For a lot of people though, they spend and then they get into January, February and say, oh my goodness, I really did do too much
Right.
in terms of overall spending, and now I have stress that lasts. How does
I won't be
somebody
able to pay for
approach
my dialysis this month.
Yeah. How does somebody approach Christmas with a mindset that says, I want to still provide and make it nice, but I don't want to overspend? How would you help somebody in that?
The first thing would be, as you mentioned earlier on this, you got to remind yourself that the Christmas is about a gift that God gives to you, not the one that you give to anybody else. And that becomes the focus of it. So you can be the poorest person in the world, okay, giving no one anything for Christmas, not even the little drummer boys song or the whatever. You don't have to be one of the three kings, to be able to celebrate. It's God's gift to you on Christmas. So I think making that focus is a big deal.
Yeah.
Because that should take the pressure off you to think that somehow this is about something I'm doing versus something that God is doing for me. Okay.
Right.
I think also something really simple is this. I think you can make a budget. I think you can realistically talk through and say, well, look, here's how much money we're going to spend on the X, Y, and Z. And maybe you have to figure out how to do that well. And so you get a little discretionary piece on the side for the things you don't see coming that you can splurge a little bit on here and there, but that you control that. And so as a result, you make things, you have realistic expectations about that. I think the other thing too is that sometimes we can give things that are, it's like when kids make things. It might not cost a lot for them to make, but it's a cool thing. We have things ornaments on our Christmas tree that our kids made when they were little, and they were Christmas presents, given. They mean a lot to you. It's a good thing. It doesn't cost a lot. It's still a gift. So find ways in which you can do things like that, where you can give to people without it having to be monetarily, realized in some way. The other thing I would say is this, is that sometimes celebrating with people is a gift, you know. And I think it's also maybe a way in which it's one of the things you can do to help, you know, break the loneliness cycle too. You can say, I'm going to make a point of being with certain people.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's people who they also need that comfort and they might be lonely, or whether it's people I know if I go to be with them, I'm not going to feel lonely. And when I go, I'm going to go participate. You know, I'm going to go not just sit on the corner, you know, someplace, but I'm going to go and interact with people. I'm going to try to and I'm going to bring something to that. Particularly this, I think that there are certain traditions that people might have when they get together. We used to do this thing all the time at like Thanksgiving. I'm sure a lot of families do it, where you go around the table and you say one thing you're thankful for this year, and everybody goes around, and it's a great experience of sharing things that we're excited about. It doesn't cost you anything. It makes a great memory. It's an opportunity for people to be real and open with each other. You know, you feel good. Maybe too with people, especially people who are missing people at this time of year because they're not able to be with them, or maybe they've died or something. Doing something that sort of not in a morbid way, but in a healthy way, memorializes them to say, hey, why don't we have this for dinner? It was so-and-so's favorite meal. And during dinner, we'll have a toast to them to remember something. We'll tell a story or two.
Right.
And it's a way, again, of trying to deal with that possible loneliness, you know, those right there. So
Yeah, no,
I think there's a lot of ways you can do things that don't cost anything, that can be about the spirit of it, and actually work against the depression and so forth that might happen.
Yeah, well, and sometimes I think it becomes so much about what you spend rather than saying what is really the heart of a gift.
Yes.
And the heart of a gift is saying, I appreciate you and want to, in some way, commemorate that. And there are a lot of ways, as you said, to do that don't have to be financially.
Especially if you can figure out how to personalize it.
Yeah.
Especially if you can say, you know, I saw this, I want to get, because this really made me think of you. This is something great about you that I think I want to affirm. You know,
so Terry, you mentioned this already about maybe participate in the life. Okay.
Hey, by the way, I want to say one other thing because something you said earlier. You know, there are people who are struggling with depression all year long. This is not the only time this happens. I would say, as a practical thing for those folks, it might not be, if you're seeing a therapist, might not be a bad idea to schedule an extra session during this time of year.
Yeah,
you know?
that's true.
Because that could really help you. I mean, because you know you're going into a stressful time. You want to have the
whatever
resources
tools you can to address
to be able to deal with that.
So you mentioned earlier about the significance of maybe getting out to church service and stuff.
Right.
One of the questions is, how can, you know, this time of year, how can you keep your spiritual focus? Obviously, church is part of that. But I meet people all the time who run so hard all month, and then they have an hour set aside for a service, you know, right around Christmas, Christmas Eve. And it's almost the first real thought to what is this season all about, other than family, gifts, you know, all of those things. How would you encourage somebody to as they kind of move toward Christmas, making the spiritual celebration the biggest part of the celebration rather than the tag on somewhere toward the end?
Well, that's a good question. And I think this, the part of the answer is this. I try not to do anything differently than I did all year long. So in other words, instead of it being something that I do this at Christmas because I want to remember it. No, I have a pattern of doing things that I build into my life. In other words, I've got disciplines that I do that help me to maintain that month. It doesn't matter whether it's the second week of June or it's this is what I do. You know, so I'm in a cycle of these disciplines and patterns that are going to bring depth to my life and bring joy to my life. And going to church would be part of those, but I think also having time alone with God. You know, being able to pray, to being able to read the scriptures, being able to give yourself away in service to other people in a variety of ways. You know, trying to grow in terms of whether it's reading a book or going to hear a speaker about something, or or getting together with other Christians to discuss. You're in a small group to discuss. I would say Don't somehow Christmas comes, you neglect all those things that were the regular disciplines that help you to get going. Make sure that so in that sense, you gotta sort of take control of the time. You know the press is going to be for you to go to 100 parties.
Right.
Don't. Just learn how to say no and be able to say,
Right.
yeah, I'm going to go to a couple of these.
Yeah.
I would say the other thing too, the real practical reason, especially if you're single, and so I think, don't go to a party by yourself. Go get a partner, get a party partner. Somebody who you can be with at that thing that sort of allows you to be able to say, well, it's time to go.
Right.
Or hey, let's make sure that we focus on what we want to have happen here while we're and not let this go in a bad direction in some way.
Yeah.
So I would say you want to do things where you're purposely slowing down the pace of your life generally, to be able to make sure that you have focused on the priorities that you have in your life. And you're right, there's going to be more pressure at certain times of year because of all the activities and all the things that people have to say.
Yeah.
That it's like with my wife and I, we one of our great invigorating things, go to the movies. We love to go to the movies. So we always make time
to go to the movies.
Yeah. So should you stop going to the movies because it's Christmas time? No, you got to get out there and see The Grinch.
All right.
And
is it good?
I don't know. I didn't see it yet.
Seen it. All right.
I'm going to.
All right.
Or you got to see Mary Poppins. Or I don't know, whatever you got to go see. But that's the kind of thing which I think it can help you to. It's something a little slower. It's something you're not.
It's part of your rhythm.
Part of the rhythm of what you're doing.
Yeah, it would seem to me that that like anything, it's about intention.
Yeah.
And what makes spiritual life hard at Christmas is the urgent things of our lives become generally more pressing. There's a few extra things that are happening, whether it's extra parties, extra shopping, extra family visiting, whatever, that crowds out the things that don't have a deadline. And spiritual life, by definition, never has a deadline.
That's right.
And so it never is the thing that has to be at the top of the priority list.
Right.
And so unless we're intentional about saying, I'm going to, whether it's, sitting alone, reading my Bible, being in community, life group, small group, going to a church service, whatever it is that helps me have those moments of connection, I have to intentionally put those back into the center of my life, or they'll just get crowded.
Yeah, and the same thing happens with many of the real practical things which work against you not being depressed. Things like getting enough sleep. Regular sleep, exercise, eating properly. Yeah. These are all things you don't do, in many ways.
That have a lot to,
and just not having enough sort of me time in a sense of being able to relax, in that kind of way. So,
Good. Well, Terry, thank you for your wisdom. A man of many years and much wisdom.
And much stress.
So thank you. Merry Christmas. Please send your questions to askapastor@orchardhillchurch.com. We'd love to interact with it in the days ahead.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.